Welcome to the Why Didn't I Know podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jenny Martin, and on this episode, we're going to talk about microdosing and sexual intimacy. Microdosing has become more popular in recent years, and the question is, how could microdosing affect sexual intimacy? We don't really have much research to go on, but I will talk to you about what is known so far. But first of all, what are we talking about when we're talking about microdosing? So microdosing is taking a small amount of a psychedelic substance, whether that be LSD, psilocybin, ayahuasca, but you're not taking the full-on dose to get the full-on altered state, all the perceptual shifts. You're taking more around the 5 to 10% of what you would get in the full-on shift in perception, visual distortion, and so forth. So with a microdose, you're getting slight mood changes, an alteration in your thinking, but not the strong effects of the altered state that comes with higher doses. And there are benefits to people that microdose. So otherwise, people wouldn't be doing it so much. And some people find that they have more focus. That's why there's talk about Silicon Valley tech people doing microdosing to be able to focus on a project and so forth. So small amounts, psychedelics affect the brain's serotonin system, and that changes how we sense things. But it's not a precise science. It's different for people. So for some people, they might feel more aware of their body, more aware of their surroundings, and when we're talking about sex and microdosing, that could translate to having a more intense physical experience and more intense sex. So the greater awareness might help people feel more present or more connected during sexual intimacy. In terms of emotional accessibility and that interpersonal communication, so in general, psychedelics have been linked to increased emotional openness and some reduced defensive psychological patterns. In sexual intimacy, if we're just looking at the neurochemical effect that facilitates greater emotional vulnerability, more authentic communication, there is some indication from the research that emotional connection can be supported. In terms of how microdosing might help people feel less anxious, stop overthinking when it comes to sex, and not be so much in a goal-oriented performance mode, for people who feel nervous about their performance or have concerns about their body during sex, it's possible that microdosing could help facilitate that feeling of being less self-conscious, more comfortable, making it easier to be themselves. Another aspect of this is your ability to think differently and be just more open-minded. And that's important during sex, to be able to not just do the same old thing that you always do. Sex is a habitual thing where you're in this position, that position, you always do it the same way. To be able to bring some novelty into the moment, to try different positions, to start things different ways, to be spontaneous in the moment, that type of thing. And to break that habitual habits of how you approach your partner, there is some indication in the research that psychedelics could promote that, what we call cognitive flexibility. But now let's look at what could be the downside of using microdosing and having sex. One of the biggest issues is that it's not a reliable way to access all of these benefits that I just talked about, because it can actually interact with your system differently on different days, depending on your mood starting off, what mood you're in before you actually microdose, depending on just the state of your nervous system, and then the state of your relationship, how you're feeling about your partner. There's just so many different variables that we call set and setting, which is your mindset, your environment, and all of that. That contributes even more than taking the plant medicine, than taking the psychedelic. Your state of mind, the context in which you're having sex, all of those things we call set and setting, those intangible things that are hard to pin down because they're beliefs, for heaven's sakes, their mindsets, their perceptions, which is, sounds very vague and fluffy, but really in the research, it has been shown that set and setting have a more powerful effect on determining outcomes than the substance itself. So having said that, the biggest challenge we have is the unpredictability of what is going to happen when you microdose on any given day and want to have sex. It is a wild card. We don't know how it's going to react. So it's not a reliable strategy to overcome your nerves, to be more creative in bed. It's not a reliable go-to solution. Things like, as I mentioned, your past experiences, the situation, all of these things make it difficult to predict and to generalize the effects. You might have had several really positive, beneficial experiences microdosing, and your partner has never done it. You give it to your partner and they have a really unfortunate experience with it where they feel very agitated, very nervous, very anxious. And that's exactly what you don't want for sex. Another potential risk with this is that microdosing can cause people's thoughts to feel scattered. It can bring up unwanted memories, unwanted thoughts, and it can make you feel disconnected from the moment, from what is actually happening with your partner. And so instead of helping with the sexual intimacy, it could actually produce the opposite effect and make it harder to connect with your partner, to connect with your present moment experience, and to feel pleasure. Because what we do know is pleasure is directly related to how present you are. So if you're taking something that is going to take you out of the moment, make you more detached in some way, that is going to lower your awareness of pleasure. What we're talking about here is that even though microdoses are small amounts, there are also potential physical side effects. There can be stomach issues, there can be muscle tightness, there can be changes in the blood flow, there can be a restriction of blood flow. And when you think about what the male and female genitals, most especially the male genitals, to have an erection, you need an actual concentration of blood flow. It is not helpful to have less blood flow going to the genitals when you want to enjoy sex and orgasm. So those things can definitely happen. And there can be an alteration in your body temperature that interferes with the sexual buildup. So you might start feeling cold, which is not optimal for the sexual experience. And you might feel overly heated. So those different effects on the body's temperature can impede the body from actually generating that excitement naturally and generating that buildup and climax. So those are some things just to keep in mind. We don't always hear these things. We hear that it's just what could go wrong. It's just a little small amount. It's 10% of a regular dose. How could that possibly even affect you much? Well, our bodies are more sensitive than we might imagine, and they actually can be greatly affected. Some of these physical effects alone can actually prevent sexual arousal and can prevent orgasm. If you are wanting to have full-on sex and not just foreplay, those are some things that you need to keep in mind. And then there is the topic of consent. So you are consenting to take the microdose, you are consenting to have sex. That's all fine and good. However, once you consume something to shift your thinking, even if you're not going into a full-on altered state, there is an interplay there with your ability to actually choose what's happening in the moment. Even though microdoses don't cause strong effects like taking a full-on psychedelic dose, they can change your thinking and your level of being able to be an autonomous actor, your level of decision making, your ability to maybe communicate clearly. And so those are things to keep in mind, is that as soon as you are taking something in to alter your mind, you might not have the level of conscious participation and autonomy and decision-making that you would have wished you had had. So if you can't communicate what your needs are, or you're not even aware of what your needs are in the moment, you only know it after the fact, then that can be problematic. So, of course, it goes without saying, psychedelics, even at a microdose level, are not legal in every state, and they're still largely considered Schedule I drugs. So I am not suggesting anyone do anything illegal at all. We're just talking about these concepts of whether microdosing can help sexual intimacy, just as a discussion, but I'm not recommending anything at all. So having said all of that, I think the most important point to keep in mind is if we go to a drug, an external substance, to solve our problems with intimacy, we're missing out on an opportunity for our own soul's growth, for our own spiritual growth, for our own evolution as a human being. There's always something to unpack there about why we are feeling the way we do in sex. It can be religious programming. It can be past sexual abuse. It can be a relationship that's actually not very functional right now. Your relationship with your partner needs work, and that's going to show up in your lack of sexual connection. Just adding a substance and trying to mask over those relational problems is not going to work long term. It's just going to prolong the inevitable. Now, temporarily, that can be useful in some contexts to actually take the substance, to experience yourself in a new way. But to get freedom, to get yourself anchored in a new identity, there needs to be more than just relying on an external aid. There needs to be the ability to actually generate that level of freedom and intimacy from within. And that's what I do when I work with people one-on-one in the different psychedelic sex programs, psychedelic cervix and so forth, or working with couples, is to help them have the sense of empowerment and the sense of being able to really step in a full way into a intimate connection by doing it organically without having to add other things in. Now, can you add in psychedelics when you have this very stable, strong, connected, visceral, sensual, passionate experience between you and your partner? Yeah, you can. And then that can be an added dimension because you know that you can get to that place without anything. And that's a level of mastery and excitement. And you can add something in just to switch things up for a moment. But if your only way of reliably connecting is to have that substance, and if that substance isn't available, you're a mess, well, then that's not growing your soul. And that's not giving you very much psychological flexibility to be able to feel empowered. And this becomes super, super important with women. If they have had an experience of rape, sexual assault in the past, to just resolve their feeling of shut down during sex by taking a substance is not honoring of yourself. You want to honor the experience by actually healing it and working with someone like myself and actually healing it before you force your body to go through the motions and just masking it with a substance. I'm thinking right now also about another aspect of this, is that when you take a substance, and for instance, MDMA, which gives you all of that feeling of being in love without actually being in love, if you take something like that just to feel more connected to your partner, you might make the wrong decisions for your life based on false information. For instance, in the documentary that Pamela Anderson, the actress, did about her life, she mentions that her husband, who ended up being quite abusive to her, Tommy Lee, on their very first date, he slipped MDMA into her drink. And she did not know until later that that had been given to her. And she's falling immediately in love with him. And he rushes to marry her within days of that date by telling her the feeling that she has of being in love is actually with him. But that wasn't true. If you watch the documentary on her life, you realize that she really avoided this guy. She was creeped out about how intense he was towards her, almost stalking behavior. And when she finally went on one date with him, he did this thing with the drug. Next thing you know, in a whirlwind, she's married. And fast forward, she has to escape with her child because she's concerned about her safety and the violence and everything. Would that have happened, that decision to marry him, if the drug had not been slipped into her drink, the MDMA? And that's a psychedelic. So if we take a psychedelic just to feel more calm, if we consent to taking it, we can actually lose autonomy to make the choices that we would have made if we had been more present. And that's what's so important. If we have an experience of meeting people that have not been very beneficial to our life, where they have actually broken our trust, it's so important to stay in your body and not to augment your state of mind by anything else, because you need to learn to be back in your body. You need to really listen to those still small voice, that gut feeling when something feels off, and not to override it and say, I should just give this person another chance. I don't really know them. It's really important to pay attention to what your gut is saying, what your sense is, and you just don't have access to that if you have altered your state. Now, that can include alcohol too. You can easily alter your state with alcohol and not make the best choice in relationship too, if that's your only go-to in terms of dating. That might sound super prudish about not having any kind of social lubricant, as we call it, but I'm more interested in people making decisions that benefit them, that they're not just making it under the influence and then they regret it, especially if someone has had a history of bad relationships. We really want to be present and to not override our body's signals. So back to microdosing. I think what I've shared with you today is the fact that there can be potential benefits, but we also need to be aware of some of the issues that I've talked about. And more importantly, if there is a consistent reason why you're not feeling either safe during sex, either fully expressed, or you're too much in your head, you're too much trying to perform, That is an opportunity to grow as an individual. And that is an opportunity to work with a coach, to work with someone to find different ways of being in the bedroom. Because what is more important than to be able to connect in an intimate, emotional, sexual, and spiritual way with our partner? That's what gives the rest of our life vibrancy, juice, life force energy, excitement. And if there's something that is blocking that experience, it's worth it to address it. And it's worth it not to just find some substance to overcome that. We are in a world today that pharmaceuticals are promoted to us all the time, and surely the pharmaceutical industry has entered the psychedelic space. And so we're going to see the promotion of psychedelics to solve all sorts of problems. But it comes back to, what do you see yourself as? Someone that's broken, that needs an external aid to fix you? Or do you see yourself as a soul on a journey that when something comes up for you, like, I just don't feel right connecting with someone from the opposite sex or someone from the same sex, if that's your inclination, and I want to, but I can't. If those kinds of things are happening in your experience, that's an opportunity for growth. That's an opportunity to explore new ways of being. And it might feel uncomfortable in the beginning to talk to someone about what's going on with you sexually. But the positive side of this is that when you do find a new way of being, when you do work through this, then you are going to feel like a completely different person in every area of your life. Because how you show up in the bedroom, it does impact how confident you are in the work arena, how confident you are to show up as who you are in every area of your life. Even though we like to think we can compartmentalize these parts of our life, it really doesn't work like that in real life. And I could go on and talk about that topic, but that's another episode. For right now, let's just say this. I'm always open to the idea that there are wonderful possibilities in terms of herbal medicine, in terms of plant medicine, to help us in various ways. But when it comes to solving deep-rooted psychological issues, spiritual things, programming from the past, it's really important not to cover it up with something that doesn't let us see what's trying to actually get addressed. And there's an opportunity there. When you take something that used to be the most debilitating thing to you, like I can't show up and be present during sex, I always check out, and you work through that, you feel invincible. You feel like nothing can stop you. And that's what I wish for anybody listening to this episode right now, is to let you know that it is possible to take whatever is blocking you right now and to have that shift. And one of the things can be very helpful in beginning that journey is to take out a journal. And remember the last time you were in a sexual situation and you felt blocked and you felt shut down. And to just put your pen in your hand, put it on a piece of paper, not on a computer, and just ask yourself, what does your body want to tell you? And just see what comes up with automatic writing. If we just become a student, a curious, compassionate student of our own experience, rather than immediately going into analyzing ourselves, or definitely not criticizing ourselves. If we criticize ourselves, we're just going to shut ourselves down, and not trying to go in to do a lot of research online and try to diagnose yourself with some condition. That isn't helpful either. Trying to over-intellectualize and analyze takes you out of your direct experience. What we need to come back to is starting with your direct experience. Now, some people ask me, do they recommend somatic work? Somatic work can be helpful, but it's not about just releasing some kind of experience in the tissue. Without an understanding of the mind-body connection, without an awareness, an appreciation, and honoring of what mind and emotions, this thing that we're calling set and setting in the psychedelic space, without honoring that, we don't get the full healing that we could if we just try to go to body work. So I'll leave you with that, to take some time to do some journaling around this and to really ask your body, as if you're inhabiting this body and you are curious about what it's there to tell you, because our body has incredible wisdom, and we might have consciously forgot different things, or we're not consciously connecting different dots. But if we become present in our body, asking it what it was there to tell us at that moment when it froze, we can start to learn what our body needed in that moment that it wasn't getting. Rather than trying to perform for another person, please another person, is to come back and listen to what our body really needs and wants, and to use that as the starting basis. So I'll leave that with you now. Thank you so much for listening. Please do rate and review this podcast on Apple or Spotify. And you can learn more about my work at drjennymartin.com. That'll be linked below. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll see you next time.